Joining us now is the executive director of the National Conversation Project, Pearce Godwin. His organization created the National Week of Conversation, which aims to mend our frayed social fabric and revitalize the country. Also here for this conversation, we've brought back to the show Beth Silvers and Sarah Stewart Holland. They are hosts of Pantsuit Politics podcast and co-authors of the book, I Think You're Wrong, But I'm Listening, a guide to grace-filled political conversations. Great. So, Pearce, tell us about the project, the week. How do you actually put this into practice?
Absolutely, Mika. Well, as you well know, America is facing a cultural crisis right now, as increasingly we don't just disagree, but we actually dislike, distrust, even despise those who see the world differently. Our animosity for positions, which is often very understandable, has become contempt for the people who hold them. We're dismissing folks as enemies with bad intentions, as threats to be destroyed, as opposed to fellow Americans, human beings worth understanding. And of course, the result is that we're withdrawing from conversations, which is eroding our relationships, our understanding, and ultimately threatening that foundational fabric of America. We know from social psychology and from the experiences so many of us have had in our own lives that cultivating more positive social connections is the way to get past this social polarization crisis. And so that's what we're encouraging, especially this week, is that folks of all stripes come together with people of diverse perspectives and listen first to understand. Thousands of people have committed to doing that. Michael Steele has committed as a leader to listen first to understand, and we're so thankful for those who are modeling the way. But this week we've got in-person and virtual conversations happening coast to coast that folks can find on nationalconversationproject.org, and really believe by listening first to understand, by inviting others into the conversation using that Listen First hashtag online, that we can mend the frayed fabric of America.
Michael Steele.
Yeah, it's such an important thing to do, and we don't do it well, Mika, and that is listen. And the best part of any conversation begins with that. When I was a young boy, my mother used to tell me, just shut up and listen. And it makes all the difference in the world. It makes the difference in understanding. It makes a difference in communication. Pearce did a program a while back, and Donna Brazil and I had a chance to participate in it, in which you have this conversation and you talk about the differences. You talk out the things that you think you may be different on, but you actually aren't that far apart. And that's the difference, I think, Mika, is the fact that we are a lot closer than we give ourselves credit for, but we are barred from getting there because we don't listen and we don't really learn how to communicate.
It's hard. And Willie, I think the politics of today makes it really hard, because it's not about right and left anymore. Yeah. I mean, right. I don't even know if it's Republican and Democrat. Then there is another side of this, I think, that's not Republican. It's convoluting.
Yeah, and everybody's at their battle stations at all times, ready to fight, and as Pearce said, assuming the worst about each other. But what we love about having you here and about your book is that you don't assume the worst, you assume the best. And it's in your book title, in fact, you say, I think you're wrong, but I'm listening, which means I disagree with you, but let's talk about the things that we disagree on. So, Sarah, what can you tell people out here who do feel like, man, we are so far apart from each other right now, and a lot of people do believe that the other side isn't just wrong, but it's evil and all that implies. How do we sort of like pull back from that a little bit?
Well, listening isn't just a decision, it's a practice. It's something we have to do over and over and over again. And we always say we need to prioritize the relationship. And for better or for worse, there's no immediate plans for any states to leave the Union. So we're going to stay in relationship together as citizens. And so even if we can start from that most basic place, okay, we're in this together, what do we want the country to look like? And just keep zooming out until we can find a place where everybody can take a deep breath.
But I think things are so tough today that we would be arguing over what it means to be a citizen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if we have to start there, we have to start there.
Wow. That feels like a setback.
So, Beth, what do you think?
Well, I think it depends on what we want our trajectory to be. So our book is I Think You're Wrong, But I'm Listening. You can still think people are wrong at the end of the conversation. There are times when we don't need to come together. There are things that we should be arguing about in this country that are more important than right versus left, as Mika said. So what we think is the trajectory right now is believing that the other person is so wrong that they're a bad human being. And we're going to keep sliding apart if we keep doing that. just listening, just making some room. You don't even have to feel empathy. You certainly don't have to endorse where the other person is. But you can say, you know what, I respect you enough to hear you out. Let's do this again and again to try to shift back to something where we're coming in one another's directions.
Hey,
Mike.
Pearce, I think we're all with you on this. I mean, I think we need more conversations between people, but we seem to be ignoring thus far in this conversation about one big element, and I don't really have an answer as to how you cope with it, and it is this, the phone. I mean, basically, we text one another more than we talk to each other now, okay?
Yes.
And as a result of these instruments, the one that I just held up in my hand and others, we are also living in what I call a no eye contact nation. People don't look at one another the way we used to look at one another. And in order to look at one another, that's the start of a conversation. What's in your eyes? Hey, talk to me about what's going on in your life. How do we cope with this stuff?
You're exactly right, and that's the irony, right, is we're on the one hand more connected than we've ever been before, but as we're all talking about here, so deeply disconnected. And I think, honestly, it starts with that practical step, with putting that phone down. We have the top 10 tips for Listen First conversations, and so many great tips also in Beth and Sarah's book, but listenfirstproject.org/tips, one of those that you'll see is be present, free of distraction. Put the phone down and actually look in someone's eyes, exactly as you said, because again, we've seen this in our own lives, as hard as it may be, as personal as it may be right now within our families, in our workplaces. Businesses are stepping forward as sustaining members of National Conversation Project because they see it too in the workplace. But we've got to come together as human beings to look each other in the eye, to realize that you are not your position, you're a human being, you're worth understanding, and that we can do more together than apart. And this is certainly a grave threat to our democracy, but again, also so deeply personal. So we have to do better. I'm not a kind of chicken little sky is falling kind of guy by nature, but this is serious. This is an urgent crisis. And 75% of Americans agree that it is that crisis, but another 75% are willing to have conversations that bridge
I just
divides.
really, where I'm stuck is when facts are removed from the conversation. How can you have a conversation over something that's not true?
Right.
I mean, the basic conversation here would be, I'm worried that the President of the United States lies to the American people. And then you have someone says, he doesn't lie, he says what he thinks.
Right.
Where does that go? And how can that not become a tough conversation
Beth has
about
a really
respecting
good
facts?
Beth has a really good cheat phrase for that. She says, I'm sorry, I don't see the truth in that. I'm
Yes.
sorry, I don't see the truth.
But then where does it go from there? Where's
Twitter.
the
Goes to
conversation?
Twitter.
It ends.
No, please don't let it go.
And I would say, okay, what would make you believe that he has lied? What sources do you find credible? What would it take at the border for you to think the president is wrong? What would it need to come out in the Mueller investigation for you to care about it? I just like to kind of go into interview mode with people and understand what is their reality, what's shaping it, what's behind their feeling about him.
Yeah,
But
and
Mika, you're absolutely right. The balkanization of our media, the fact that I'm hearing exactly what I want to hear from somebody just like me, does create an impasse in so many conversations. So we have to break out of those silos, those echo chambers, and ultimately, I think through conversation, we can find that common understanding of facts to then proceed towards a solution.
It's a challenge.
And we don't have to come with draft legislation at the end of every conversation.
No.
We don't have to come to a full
I would love
agreement.
to just agree that the president lies. That would be helpful
I
because
agree.
he does.
I
But,
agree.
all right. It's the National Week of Conversation. Pearce Godwin, thank you. Beth Silvers, Sarah Stewart Holland. Thank you both as well.
Thanks
the
so
book
much.
is I Think You're Wrong, But I'm Listening.
Thanks,
Up
guys.
next.